I'm focusing this morning on a query into how we might cultivate a prophetic imagination for the kingdom of God, given the earthly context in which we're living right now. And truly, on today, this has been scheduled for some time, but on today, we are in the midst of a very, very turbulent context in that the administration has released National Guards into uh, Los Angeles, right into a residential community, uh, purporting that it's a move to stop illegal immigration, but it's really, in reality, it's all over the place. It's sort of an onslaught of multiple dimensions, and so uh, I believe that this is not the only city that's going to be hit this way. I believe that this is a tactic um, to instill and stir up fear. And I think really over since the beginning of this administration, there's been a conscious attempt to stoke fear and to keep the populace on edge, which presents a real peculiar, a particular time of concern for those of us who follow God, who are seeking God's kingdom, who lead people in the things of God, because what fear has a tendency to do, terror and fear has a tendency to shut us down. And I'm always talking about how we open up to allow the imagination of God, to allow the spiritual imagination to really grow and breathe. And so anytime that attempts are made to cause us to become fearful and shut down, that means that we retract instead of expand. It's a very, very difficult time for the element of prophetic imagination that I esteem and I am learning to live in, even myself, that in the midst of all of this terror and this fear, uh, it's very hard for us to be open, but it's very much necessary for us to stay open. How do we, and this is a rephrasing of the same question, how do we stay open to see and to hear what God is saying to us, how we might live, how we might live well, how we might live as Christ in this very kind of time? And I mean, all throughout the Bible, you can just read any of the prophets, any of the prophetic moves, and the Old Testament. All throughout the Bible, God's people were pressed and pushed to retract, because really the work of the enemy is to get us to believe that God is other than who God is. So this idea of staying open is my idea that would help us to lean into and recall the promises of God, right? Because really and truly, as faithful people, if we can get lost and moved away from the promises of God, then what we see is the only reality we have. What we see is a whole a battalion of armed guards coming into our residential streets, ready to do whatever. And that would lead our imagination to go even further than what's real. I mean, we will imagine even all kinds of abominations that haven't occurred yet, but we're stuck and we're not seeing what God can do. So in this hour, in this context, my advice for us is to go against that tendency, go against that grain, and stay open. We do that by one, focusing on the practices of Christ. What did Christ do? Christ gathered with other people. So gather with other people. Why are we gathering with other people? Because we're going to be able to see the humanity of one another. And that humanity, wherever we can find it, it will help us to realize that God is still at work. Two other particular things I want to say to us today in the context, as far as to look back look at our past, look back at the biblical past, look back at our ancestral past, because our ancestors are echoing through our lives right now. So look back and realize that God saw them through some horrible times, some unspeakable times. Those in the Bible, as well as those ancestors who walked this earth. And look back to those times with gratitude. With gratitude. And when we can latch onto the gratitude from our past, then it helps us to look forward with expectation for our future. So this idea of gathering with other people, looking looking back at what God has done for and through faithful people in past times, and then it stokes us to open up our imagination for what God can do in this very circumstance, in this very context. God will come in and it'll be a suddenly kind of a sudden kind of a move. Even this rift that's going on between the elected president and his best friend, that is a suddenly kind of thing that nobody thought was going to happen, but it's a part of God moving and saying, I'm still in charge. He's still in charge. And so no matter how many National Guards are being released, and it wounds my heart. It does. I've got friends, great friends in there, down there where it's happening, and it wounds my heart. But no matter how many are released, what God is saying to us is God is still in charge. And so it's only a delusion. They're only trying to cover it up so that we don't see and stay focused on the fact that God is still in charge. And so those are my instructions for us right now where we sit, man, is to stay open, pull together, come join with others, because in that joining, you're going to find joy. And remember, reflect on the past and expect the future. So that's my word today for me, you, all of us who are trying to make it through and trying to stay on the right path. That's our instructions. Yes, sir.